this film to me is so extraordinary. It works on every level, like the writing, the directing, the performances, and the producing. I feel like you all were working together to make the same film, and you achieved something really, really remarkable with it. So I want to get into how you all made it, but congrats.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Hi.
Hello.
What a gift to be in this room, to be invited here tonight. So many of us have been supported by Film Independent, and most recently, the producer award, Monique, given on the stage by Colman.
Yes.
So it's a joy to be here. Thank you.
So, I mean, my first question is sort of obvious, but I want to ask where this project originated. Did it start with a screenplay, or Clarence, was this something that you brought out into the world, connecting with people to see how can we tell a story about RTA, or where did it really begin?
Well, we've been working on this project for over 8 years, and I first came across this story quite unexpectedly. I was producing a short documentary inside of a maximum security prison in Kansas, and it was my first time ever behind the walls. And on a tour of the facility, we were doing a project about something different, but I passed by a cell, and there was a young man raising a rescue dog inside of a cell. And immediately in that moment, all my expectations of prison, incarcerated people were upended, primarily driven by the movies I had seen, growing up. And I was just desperate to know who else was out there doing things differently. And I was at the hotel that night. I typed into Google who was doing things differently in prison. And near the top of the search field was this program in New York, Rehabilitation Through the Arts. And they'd done, all the classic plays. They had been in a lot of the press, but I came across this Esquire article about a production that had been performed for 2 nights only inside Sing Sing of a time-traveling musical comedy called Breaking the Mummy's Code. And immediately I was just struck by the playfulness of the tone of it, the playfulness of this work juxtaposed against such a dark environment. It just sort of felt like life to me. And I reached out to the real Brent Buell and the journalist, and when I got him with Brent, he was like, well, if you want to know the story, you need to meet the men who lived it. Why don't you come up for breakfast? And so my creative partner, Clint, and I showed up at this breakfast, and the first man through the door was Clarence Maclin. And the next man through the door was John Divine G. Whitfield, who Colman plays. And I won't bore you with the next, 6 years, but I'll just say that the way we finally found our path was trying to mirror our writing process like the program operates, which is in such a community-driven spirit. And anytime Clint and I would try to write ourselves, it would always feel like an imitation of what was happening in the space, in the room. And the way we finally captured that was by opening that circle up and inviting people into it, first with Clarence and Divine G, and then with Colman. And I don't know if the two of you want to speak to how you came to it, and then Monique maybe, but
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, like you said, Brent approached us, a few of the alumni of RTA, and asked us, did we want to be a part of this movie, be a part of being in a movie? And for me, it was a no-brainer. I'm a ham, so if we put a spotlight on the ground, I'm gonna jump in it. That's how it go. So it was a no-brainer thing for me. Of course I want to be in it.
And Clint and Greg, they approached me after, I think we met originally at like a Film Independent.
Well, we met on Zoom and then met finally in person at the Spirit Awards.
Yeah,
That was the first time I met, was
wild.
actually here.
And then,
Amazing.
Yeah, exactly. And they had this idea, and they said, hey, we want to send you this Esquire magazine article. We don't want to send you a script, because they went through many phases of trying to find the story. But they said, I think that if you would like to collaborate with us, I think we can really come together and find what makes this story really shine. And I just loved their whole vibe in every single way, and the way they wanted to do it. And I thought, yeah, I would love to be a part of it. And so we started with some initial Zooms, and they would share some material, and then we would talk about what was important to us, and we would just vibe, me and this guy. Right. And then this went on for a while, and then we finally got to a draft, and then it was time to, they were very clear about wanting to do it, and I thought, well, I don't have any time right now, and they said, well, when can we do it? I said, maybe next year or something. And then they were like, but what about this year? We really think we should get it done. There was from the producers, this gentleman, everything, there was propulsion to get it done. And I had 18 days in between The Color Purple and Rustin. And he said, I'll
take him.
And so off we go to upstate New York to decommission prisons and high schools to film this film that we wanted to pour everything we had into.
Amazing. Monique, I'd love to hear, as a producer, how you came onto this and what drew you to it.
Yeah, so this was, I came on 6 years into this development process. But Greg and I met by chance in Austin, and they had recently come out with Jockey and had done this financial model, and so they invited me to moderate a panel that they did on the financial model on Jockey, and so that's how I got to know Greg and Clint initially. And after the panel at South by Southwest, they pitched me on Sing Sing. And
it was an ambush.
It was an ambush. Yeah, they ambushed me basically. But they said, they shared the story, which I thought was so powerful. And it was, I said, this is a film about healing. That was like my initial response, and it felt like a healing process movie. Mm-hmm. And then they said, Colman Domingo's attached, which was really exciting. They said, but we don't have any financing yet. And we're shooting in, a couple months. Like, what do you think? You want to jump in?
Script wasn't done either.
They're like, you want to jump in? Come move to upstate New York with us. So I took a minute. I took a beat to think about it.
Yep.
But then, ultimately, I just found that the way that they wanted to tell the story, collaborate in this collaborative way with the community that it's about, it just felt like this really powerful way to tell it.
Beautiful. Clarence, you mentioned, we were talking backstage, and you mentioned almost the whole cast is from the RTA program. You're working with a lot of people who are now out of prison but went through it. And can you talk, I'd just love to hear about, maybe it's a question for all of you really, but about the casting of how you created the world inside the prison with, former incarcerated people who'd gone through RTA. That's got to be a unique experience. And the prison was decommissioned, but still you're shooting inside a prison. Mm-hmm. I'd love to hear any and all of you talk about sort of how you built that world, how much was it gaining the trust of the former RTA people? What was that process like?
Well, us in the RTA, we already had a theater program already up, so we already knew the dynamics of what we was trying to do. We already knew that, but coming together with these beautiful people right here, it just elevated the same thing we was already doing to another level, and we got to show a lot of skills that we had learned while we were a part of the program inside. We got to display a lot of the things because we had a lot of people come in and train us in this field of art. We had a lot of people from Broadway. We had Grandmama, who has her own theater troupe in China, and she came in and trained us and gave us certain skills and certain exercises that we did and certain things. So all these things came together, and we had a bigger purpose than the apprehension that we felt about going back inside a prison and putting back on prison uniforms, because the purpose was much bigger than the apprehension. The purpose was to let people out here see that we are more than just prisoners. We're more than ex-offenders.
I want to ask both of you, in terms of acting, first of all, both of your performances are so extraordinary. And what really struck me is...
let's clap for that.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
Well, thank you.
But one of the things that struck me is that so much of it is so simple. It's like two people talking in a cell, like you and Mike, or the two of you. I mean, all your scenes together are so powerful, but they're really simple. It's like your faces... You're just being present for each other on screen. And it's remarkable filmmaking and acting. It's like, I feel like I'm privileged to be watching this occurring in real time. And I guess there I am with another comment. But I do want to, both of you, one of the things that's really interesting to me is both of you have really significant arcs across the movie. I mean, Colman, you start off this gentle, amazingly welcoming, nurturing spirit. And by the end, we see you go through so much over the course of that movie. It's It's really remarkable. And Clarence, for you too. I mean, you come in, maybe it's a little bit the opposite. Like you come in with this palpable rage, like you are scary. I mean, the first scenes together, and when the guy walks behind you on stage, and your reaction, like, and then where you end up together, like the final scene of you in the car, is like.
Well, that was also very conscious in our conversations of how we're building these characters, where these two should feel like they should never have, like they stay away from each other,
Yeah.
you know, in this complex. But they find, by coming together, that what this program does well, that they find they need each other. They need, you know, there's something that they're missing a little bit, a missing piece that the other one can provide.
Yep.
And for me as a performer, now just remember, I was shooting this film in between Color Purple and Rustin, two very performative performances. You know what I mean? One, I had a mid-Atlantic standard accent and played the lute, and the other one, I was an abuser, and they required so much size. But in the middle of that, I think what this afforded was something simpler and gentler. And I also thought it was important for me to be folded in with these gentlemen, for me not to stick out, but I wanted to fold into these men that I was getting to know and how they told stories and how they spoke to one another, which required something different for myself. And for me, it was a great opportunity to really, as you know, when I'm in 80% of this movie, to just really lay bare in a different way and really find how I play off of him, how he plays off of me, and then it just keeps, I think it becomes fiery, but you find that that's also the seeds of what's underneath of this brotherhood that they're going to eventually have, that they need that fuel underneath,
Something you said to me in our second meeting, you were setting an intention for your performance, but I didn't realize you were also setting an intention for the movie, which is, he said that I want performance to be honest, I want it to be elegant, and I want it to be tender. And that sort of warmed its way into me, and then it became a lens by which sort of I was thinking about everything we were doing, like every part of the process of how can we center that in the filmmaking process. And another thing that we sort of realized from the filmmaking side, as it gazed into these beautiful performances, was, how do you achieve scope and scale for cinema inside such a confined space? And this breakthrough we had in talking with Pat Scola, our cinematographer, and the rest of our team was like, oh, this is a movie about the landscape of the human face, about drawing close to someone and looking them in the eyes. And then when you have the eyes of these two men here, it's infinite, really. And something I also learned, the gift of working with Colman, was he's an actor you never want to call cut, because something is always at work and happening.
Yeah.
And then when you see that happening and everything is sort of a gift unfolding, you start to realize also that's teaching something about the cadence of let's just be patient. Let's just let things happen here, because magic is happening.
We talked about that thought of Ma, that we talked about Ma. Just as we were developing this, there's certain things that kept coming up. One was tenderness, the idea of seeing black and brown men being tender together. You know what I mean? Really helping each other to achieve their heart goals, in their purposeful goals that will carry them on outside of these walls. And then we also talked about Ma, which is this, I think this Chinese thought of where everything and nothing's happening at the same time, and to allow for that breath and those silences. And I commend you as a filmmaker to trust that there was something going on always, and it didn't have to be filled. And there were times we actually struggled with a couple scenes that had a lot of verbiage, and at some point I was just I think we're talking too much. And one of them is the ending scene in the car, where we finally got to that, and we realized that we needed no language. It was just what would happen between these two men, and the language, to trust that he had given us that foundation as a director, in that journey for that to be realized,
Monique, I'd love to hear you talk a bit about your role as producer. So you alluded to when you came on and there was no financing in place and all of that. this is an independent film. And I'm assuming it must have had many challenges in terms of getting it made. I'd love to hear you talk about that. But also,
What do you mean? It's so easy to make films.
I'm also curious. I've read that you all took a different approach to filmmaking. You wanted to have a particular type of set, and it's a sort of ethical filmmaking at play here in how you made it. I'd love to hear you elaborate on that.
Yeah, I think, it was really about what Greg and Clint call like community-based filmmaking, and how do you tell these stories in a way that really, as a collective, and kind of create space that's of mutual respect and exchange. And part of that, one big piece of that, was this financial model that they had done on their previous film Jockey. And when they brought it to me, they were like, okay, we made Jockey, it was a micro budget, but let's see if we can scale this up. And the idea of the model is that everyone gets paid the same rate, and everyone participates in the profits. And when we say everyone, we mean everyone. And so everyone, so I thought that was really, incredible, because it sets a tone and a culture, and it attracts the people who are interested in doing things differently to the project. And then as a producer, what's wonderful is that there's no negotiation. It's
Very
like,
nice.
it is what it is. But of course, producing is done. You can't produce alone. It's really done as a team. And one of the things that was amazing was, like, early on, Colman Domingo, the Colman Domingo said, yeah, let's do it. Like, that's the way to make this film. And having him kind of buy in wholeheartedly into this process, just gave us even more, gas to propel us forward. But ultimately, what I was trying to do, what we were all trying to do, is set a tone and set a culture on set where everyone felt valued, everyone felt like they could bring their life to the work, and that the RTA alumni could bring their life experience to the work and feel safe doing that, and not feel like it was an extractive process, but feel like it was really a collective process. Yeah.
Wow, it's fantastic. Beautiful. I wanted to ask, in the center of the film, there's a sequence. It's a long portion of the film, so maybe sequence is the wrong term. But I thought it was this incredible middle portion of the film. Colman, it starts, I think for me, it started the scene with you and Mike having the conversation where he dies at the end. You don't know it, but you think he fell asleep. It's that, the way you're having that conversation, it's that same simple intimacy. And then it cuts to, it's a shot of the outside of the doors, and you see, it's this beautiful shot, but horrifying, where you see how small the cells are and the conditions that everyone there is living under. And then it progresses. This sequence to me is like the sequence of your transformation of, like, the walls, not the walls, I say the walls closing in, but it's more than that. Like, everything that happens to you, starting with his death, all the way up to the moment when you lose it on stage. It's like that build, you see all the pressures coming down on you. And it's actually a question for you and Greg, like, the pacing of that was incredible. And I just feel like it's your performance, but it's also the way it's structured as a film. Like, this steady build and the just ongoing pressures to the point where we see a different side of you. You're in a radically different place.
I think I'll start by just saying, based on the real John Whitfield, the things that I've clued into is here's a man who was wrongfully accused of a crime that was sentenced to prison, and he still believed in the system that put him there. He still went to the law library every day to advocate for others, and also even for himself, believing that the system can work. For me, that tells you about, that was everything I needed to know about him, that he still had hope.
Yep.
And it wasn't, the lights didn't go out yet. He was still there. And for me, in that section of the film, by the way, Mike is actually played by my very best friend in the world, Sean San Jose.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So there's a meta quality throughout this entire film in many ways. But we talked about when Mike died and how it was important that we've even discussed it so many times. What does he die of? What happens? What happens? And of course, there's many tropes you could fall into, that. But I love the fact that Greg said to me that sometimes people just die. They go away. We don't know but they go away. But what's more important is we have to deal with the aftermath of it. And for me, in that moment, I know for sure, I thought, well, I think this character would sort of just shut it all down because he has no way to have an outlet. Everything has closed in on him and he's not getting his just desserts in any way. And he feels as if, I think I played that he just stopped and he was just trying to move through and people trying to ask him questions like, I don't want to, because I think he believes the lights would go all the way out. I think that he felt like the ground will open up and he would just be sunk into it until it comes out when he can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
And then he even says it's too much on the heart. How much can a person take? Especially when they're just trying and they're trying. And for me, that wasn't just about my character. That was about all these men in there, the people who are trying, but the systems that are at play to take them out of it, in some way, designed to take them. Am I right? To take you out of it. But it's like, so I'm like, you're trying to hold on to this thing you found that gives you some grace, that gives you some light, the best way you have. And that's not even for John or for the men inside, for all of us, for me. It's the playing the world that we live in right now. So for me, performative wise, it was playing on all these different levels. And for me, it was like, yeah, it's not just about this character, but it's about you out there right now and how you're trying to hold on to your humanity the best way you can. And the world is set up in a way to take it right out of you. So for me, it's playing that arc all the way through till he's able to give a release. When you finally see him about to fight, that's not him. Right. He's throwing up hands, but like, how much can a person take? For me.
Well, it's not much to add. I think the only thing I can add is actually to jump to the end of the movie, because I think Colman recognized that, and you carried so much through this process. There's a lot you were holding on to. Because I even remember when we first Zoomed with Divine G, when you met him for the first time, and we were on Zoom together, and you heard this story. And at the end, he got off and we just sort of wept together. And you just said, how did he hold on to that divine energy for so long? That's 25 years. And when that clemency hearing happens and that clemency is denied, to the day he actually walked out the gates, that was 7 years from that moment to that moment at the gates. And you internalize that in that scene when he meets Clarence at the car. I remember so clearly you came up to me and you grabbed me and were like, I'm going through a lot right now. I'm feeling a lot. I'm feeling all of this. And you have to make me a promise that Clarence will not touch me in the scene, because I don't think I can take it. And I said, I promise. But and something that was very important to us was this trust, and we never lied to each other. We really didn't, and I don't think I lied to you then, because I know what you were saying something, but I know what you were actually asking for was the opposite. And so I went up to Clarence and I said, Colman's going through something right now, and he made me promise that you wouldn't touch him, but whatever you do, do not let him go. And that is actually the only direction in that scene. And everything that happened, nothing else was scripted about that. And when he grabs you, everything you're talking about, you were holding on to.
I want to hold the weight of his experience and how when he finally is let out of those gates. And so for me, it was like carrying all of that, of like, you're just having empathy and wonder, how does anyone carry all that? And finally they're able to be out in the air again. And all they think is they're walking up the hill to get the bus. But then this man's waiting there. And I think it's all too much for him. Mm. And so what happened there was just two actors taking in the weight of the experience, because that scene happened very late in our 18 days. Yeah. And you saved it for us. And then by the time we got there, we're like, play it. We now know what's underneath. We had versions of the script. And we said, and then you said, let's just play it. And you put that camera in the car. I didn't even know where the camera. We didn't know where the cameras were. And then this man showed up, arms open, and I said, "Oh no, I can't do it." And then he said, "Oh yes, you can. I'm going to hug you.
You got to do it.
And I'm going to hug you." And then a wail came out of me, and then we continue with the scene. But it was set up in a beautiful. You don't get that unless you set up in a very devised way that has a lot of trust that your actors know the journey of the film, and to say that okay, we're going to trust all the elements that were set up and trust the story. So I credit I mean, this truly, and I just say this because no one's truly said this yet, but when I've heard Monique said it's a collaboration. This was a true collaboration because it didn't ask you to sit in your lane. You crossed over many times and you said, I have an idea about this, or what is this, or how is that being shot, or what's the camera? What everyone did in a joyous, loving manner. And it wasn't like stepping on anyone's toes. It was that we were frustrated. Well, this scene doesn't make sense. Does it make sense to you? Now let's go. Can we do this? And so we would play around with it. We had a sense of play. And I think that's also how we had a sense of ownership as well. So that's why I feel like I look at this film and I say we all feel like we own this film, literally and figuratively. So thank you.
So, yes. I mean, that's extraordinary filmmaking. What you're describing, that collaborative process and sense of ownership, is really extraordinary and, to me, genuinely inspiring for what filmmaking can be. So I hope all the producers and directors are listening. So I have one last question for you before we need to let you go. And it's actually not about the film, but about RTA. How is the program doing now? And I'm curious, I'm assuming the answer is yes, but is RTA engaged around this film? Is there a partnership there that is going to be part of how the film rolls out and is released?
RTA is doing very well, and this film is definitely a plus in showing other people that exactly what RTA is capable of doing in producing, and the type of men that come out because of RTA. We got a 3% of people going back in RTA as opposed to a 60% nationwide of people going back to prison.
Wow.
So the program works.
Amazing.
And RTA, they're very, very involved when it comes to making sure we're out there, and socials and engagement, screenings, you name it. We're very much like in partnership with RTA. Great.
Well, the film opens this Friday. Please, everybody, tell your friends, go see
Tell
it.
your friends. Thank you.
I want to thank you all so much. Thank you for being here and sharing about the film, and thank you for the film itself. It's really extraordinary.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Josh. Thank you all.
Thank you all.